The Winds of War update for Gray Zone Warfare has changed a ton, especially in the settings category. There's a bunch of new adjusted settings, there's a couple new settings that weren't even a thing before, and so if you're returning just to try out the game again, I am going to break down every single setting and let you know what you should be setting if you want better visuals, better performance, or a mix of the two. I'm hoping that with this video you'll get a better understanding of what each one of these settings does, so you'll be able to make more conscious decisions on what you should set based on your given hardware and your preferences. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about Unreal Engine in the past week or so, and I have been collecting a couple screenshots and trying to just do some comparisons and stuff for the settings. So if this helps, again, do hit the usual buttons down below. I'm going to be covering Gray Zone Warfare a lot. I'm a field agent for the game, so if you want some drops, make sure to check out my Twitch channel. I get some exclusive stuff over there. And yeah, if you need any help, join my Discord. There's a bunch of people in there who can help you out. But with all of that stuff out of the way, we can't waste any more time because we have a lot to get through. Let's get to it. The first setting that we're going to be looking at is Global Illumination Quality, which is right here. And the thing that Gray Zone Warfare changed about this is that in the past, all four of the options, whether you're at low, medium, high, or epic, they all used Lumen, which is Unreal Engine 5's dynamic lighting system that handles, well, global illumination and partially some of the reflections, depending on what reflection quality. We'll get there later. Gray Zone Warfare's devs didn't want to get rid of that originally because they were worried about some of the competitive integrity by removing Lumen, and also because it did help with the lighting in the game. At the end of the day, though, they did decide to at least experiment with this wipe by adding the ability to turn it off by going to global illumination low. So I'm just going to run out here the front gate here, stand in the center, and you'll quickly see that the lighting changes the second I go to low here. So let me go from epic to medium, or to high, down to medium, and then down to low there. Now you can see that I gained a significant chunk of performance just by going down to low, but of course the lighting got significantly worse. Madfinger did state that some interiors may look a bit more dark than they should, and they are currently working on fixes for that. However, they did want to get this out for us to test, so if you are struggling for performance really badly and need a major boost, this is where you should go. However, in the past, since it was, Lumen all the way around, I believe their description on the setting is a bit outdated now because medium and high now look really similar. So you can see here's medium and here's high. I mean, it's very close, and describing it as settings of high and above utilizing more precise ray tracing, I don't know if that's correct because it looks like both high and medium are utilizing Lumen. And even if high is more precise, epic really is where it takes it to the next level. Not to mention, high and medium also run very similarly. As you can see there, it basically does not move. However, to sum all of that up, if you want the best visuals, of course, at no performance, performance is no number, you can go to epic. But if you'd like a decent mix of performance, you can either go to high or medium. And of course, if you need that massive boost and you're really struggling to play the game, low global illumination is going to have you covered, albeit at a cost to visual quality. I will say for me, because of the slight struggle that Lumen has at medium and high at keeping things stable and not having light sort of shimmer around a little bit, I personally will be sticking to epic because I get acceptable performance at that level, but obviously your mileage may vary. Next up on the list is shadow quality, and actually for that we're going to go back inside because there's a place that if you watch my original settings guide you might remember. Back in here there's a little table that has a light on it that you can trigger. You're going to see that light is now cast on the table, and we have some shadows to look at here. There's some shadows on the coffee cup there and on the PC. And what's really interesting about this is this in the past used to be where I would recommend medium shadow quality. You'll see at epic and high the shadows are a lot softer than they are on medium. Not to mention medium has a little bit of fuzz on the shadow, which makes it a bit worse in terms of quality in comparison to high and epic. Not to mention the distance is also less for shadow quality for medium, and as you go down it starts to get less and less. Low in the past used to be just an even worse shadowing of these, but now with the new low settings that they're currently testing, these shadows just disappear. Now in general it does have a significant impact on the look of things, and especially I noticed for some of the foliage, even though well, that's going to be kind of difficult to showcase right now. But a lot of things lose their shadow detail, but that does in turn help out substantially with performance. If this is acceptable to you, then running at lowest quality shadows may be the thing you want to do. If you want a good mix between shadow quality and performance, then you should go to medium. Medium is going to be that sweet spot for you. If you want the best shadow quality and don't care about the distance of the shadows, that's where you would choose high. And then if you're worried about the distance of the shadows, then you're going to want to take the step up to epic. Depending on the scene, the performance difference in between these different settings can vary, but obviously having very little shadows in general is going to be the best way to go in terms of just raw performance. Again, this is one of those settings that makes it really accessible for lower end hardware, and I'm actually kind of happy that they went with such a aggressive approach to this, and it doesn't fully break the game, obviously, but they did a really good job with sort of cleaning up the stuff that wasn't as necessary for the lowest low option. However, since I do like my detail shadows, I will probably stick to high for me personally, but of course I could step up to epic if I'm having issues where I see some shadows popping in at a distance. Next up is a new setting actually, which is object quality. Now this didn't exist back in 0.1 when I did my first settings guide, and object quality at first I thought would be similar to object LOD quality, meaning that, you know, as objects get further away, they get to lower quality and lower amount of polygons and all that. And sometimes, like in Tarkov, for instance, trees would turn to 2D. But obviously, we have a foliage quality setting first and foremost. And secondly, the devs are very conscious of settings affecting gameplay mechanics. So they didn't want to go overboard with this. So it makes me think that that's why they approached it the way they did here. And the way they approached it is by being very careful with what they're actually culling. At least that's what it seems like. This right here, this little bit of dirt at the tip of my knife right there, is one of the only places that I could actually see the pop-in occur at the lowest quality object quality. So if I go in here and set this to low, I have to run all the way to the edge of the house right here before that actually pops out of view. With how sort of non-aggressive this seems to be at a first glance, it makes sense as to why I can't really measure a performance difference between all these different options. It's possible that this may help more in very densely packed environments like, say, Tiger Bay or Fort Nerith, but unfortunately I wasn't able to test that before, making this video. If there's any update to that, I'll make sure to post that in the description and in the comments below, so just keep an eye down there. And of course, I'll talk about it in my streams and stuff. But at least on the testing that I was able to do, there wasn't that much of performance scaling with this option. If you are able to find a place where performance scales, please do let me know in my Discord, and I'll go ahead and take a look and update the description. But for now, it doesn't seem like there's that much scaling, and of course, if pop-in's annoying to you, you're probably going to want to set this as high as you can. Next up is texture resolution. Now you might think that this just controls, say, the quality of a texture, but actually in Unreal Engine 5 it's a bit more complex than that. They use a thing called MIP streaming, which basically controls how textures are streamed in based on, if somebody's looking at them. So for instance, you'll see there's a painting in here that I will run up to, and as you see when I'm like stuttering like crazy. As you see, as I run towards this painting right here, it's going to get higher and higher quality until I get up to it. That is what MIP streaming does. It streams in higher quality textures as you get closer to certain objects. Now the thing I want to cover is that, for example, if I go to my iCat here, I'm going to go ahead and put in these texture quality pictures here with low on the left and epic on the right. So low, medium, high, epic. You can see the names down there. You'll see that the quality of the textures on the ground is severely worse on low, marginally worse on medium, and then high and epic seem to look the same. And that is because of the MIP bias of these default texture settings in Unreal Engine 5. Higher number that MIP value is, the worse textures are going to look closer to the camera. As far as I could understand, because again, I'm not like a developer, this reduces the memory bandwidth impact on these textures and makes it quicker to stream in. But also, of course, when you're setting this lower, you have lower texture pool sizes for the memory and stuff like that, so that's why these textures will be of lower quality. High and epic have the same MIP bias value of 0, where medium has a MIP bias value of 1, hence why it's slightly lower quality, you can see there. And low has a MIP bias value of 16, that's offset by a separate value. You don't need to understand the nitty gritty of that, but basically it is much lower quality than these other options are. In fact, you can see here that the Epic basically increases the streaming pool size of the quality, and of course has slightly better anisotropy, which determines how textures look at different angles. If you have enough VRAM, say 16 gigs and above, Epic should be just fine. But if you are struggling with VRAM limitations and are having issues with memory in general, a good mix will be texture quality at 1, as you will have nice textures relatively in comparison to low, without making the game literally look like mud. I mean, this is, kind of crazy how bad low can look. Alternatively, if you want the game to just choose what textures are best for you, you can go down. There's a 5th option here at the end for automatic, which will just automatically decide what the best texture quality is for you and just apply it like that. For me though, I'll probably be sticking to either high or epic. There's not really any measurable performance impact for me between the two, so I might just stick with the higher pool size and go to epic here. And again, the sweet spot for most people is going to be medium. This is me from the future, by the way, really quick. I want to let you know, for texture quality in particular, 8GB GPUs and less are forced to be on low. This is a dev decision as a short-term decision because of a memory leak issue that they were having. They have a fix that they're going to be implementing pretty soon, and within the next week or so after this video is posted, it should be resolved and you should be able to adjust your texture quality from there. Once you are able to, and if you're on an 8GB GPU, I would recommend switching over to the medium texture resolution option over low, as long as you're not experiencing any stuttering issues from doing so. Also, sorry, by the way, I should have explained, this right here is just the base scalability file from Unreal Engine 5 in general. It is not the scalability file from Gray Zone Warfare. I was just using this as a place for me to base my knowledge off of and to get a better idea of how they might be setting certain settings. So don't take it like I have some secret access to one of their files or anything. This is just the base file from Unreal Engine 5 for me to get a better idea generally of what they're doing. Next up is effects quality, and this relates to a bunch of different stuff, including the water here that's piling up, the weather, screen space, global illumination effects, along with subsurface scattering, which is for the skin as well. Before we get started, just know that it will take a moment for each effects quality to load in, so don't assume that the rain's not loading in yet. It takes a second to gather that information. So this is currently low, this is medium, this is high, and this is epic. The only thing that I could really notice is that the density of the raindrops and the effects on the ground increases based on the quality setting you have here. So if that's something that's sort of visually distracting for you, then maybe you want to tone this down a little bit. The performance impact seems to be about 5% between the different options, so in my recommendation, if you can afford to run this at a higher quality, I would do so, just because I think it makes the rain look that much better. Otherwise, it seems like a good sweet spot for performance would be either medium, if you want a good mix in between the two, which I'll showcase again now. As you can see, this is medium. Or if you need the most performance possible, low is going to be where you're going to want to sit. But again, as you can see, it sort of like has a max range for the rain effects here. Like I said as well, personally, I will be sticking to epic for effects quality. Next up on the menu though is reflections quality, which is very straightforward. Basically, low and medium reflection quality is using a older screen space reflection technology, which basically means that anything on the screen is reflected in a given reflection. Anything that's outside of the screen is not reflected in that reflection. So you can see as I move my head down here at epic reflections, part of the pool starts to go away in the reflection. And it comes back when it comes back into view. That is screen space reflections. Now you might be wondering why it still does that on epic settings, and that's because though it uses Lumen, it's still using a screen space reflection version of Lumen. Going to say medium will increase that effect and the reflections look significantly worse, but it does help improve your performance by a substantial amount. At least during rainfall, you can net at least a couple more percent FPS going to medium from epic. If you're looking at a sweet spot between performance and visuals, medium is going to be where you want to be, but if you want the best visuals possible, go to epic. High doesn't really offer any sort of significant performance boost ahead of epic, and low instead of medium is also the same thing. It's just a worse quality screen space reflection and does not really impact the performance by a meaningful amount. For me personally, I will also be sticking to epic for this setting. Next up is Foliage Quality, which I'll use some external screenshots to compare instead, as it might be a little difficult to see right now. Now I'm in Nvidia's iCat software, which will allow me to compare these live on the fly, and this might be a little difficult to notice on first glance. So instead of doing this, we're going to go to a split screen option where I can show you a bit more of the difference firsthand. You can basically think of the Foliage Quality slider as a level of detail for trees over a distance. So the higher you set your foliage quality, the better trees are going to look from far away, and you'll also notice less trees sort of phasing into their higher level of detail counterparts. For example, going from low to medium, you should see a change in some of these bushes, and I'll highlight that for you in the post process in the editing here. There's also some trees that gain a lot more fluff, and they are upgraded in terms of their level of detail. Note though that every setting you go up in this, it does slightly impact your performance. It's really a percent or two difference in performance based on how much foliage is in the camera view for each setting you go up. If you're trying to aim for the best performance possible, low is where you're going to want to be. But if you want a decent mix of performance and visuals, you're probably going to have to bottom out at medium. If you're aiming for visuals, obviously epic is going to be where you want to be. But I would say the difference between high and epic is the hardest to notice because of the distance that it's working at that point. You can see that foliage quality is basically only affecting foliage in the distance. There is also this portion here that's getting affected close up, but for the most part, it's affecting only things that are pretty far away. So if you want a little bit more performance, you can set to high. This actually might be one of the settings that I'm going to leave at high just to net a little bit more performance on average. Next up is shading quality, and honestly, I'm not going to waste y'all's time with this. This has done nothing going to the different options, and as far as I could see in Unreal Engine 5 source code, this primarily affects hair lighting and also a very specific anisotropic distribution method, which is just for how textures or how materials look in that case at different angles. I really won't waste your time with this. There was no performance impact I could see at all, so this really doesn't matter wherever you set this to, and I will leave this at epic. If you notice anything though that you can measure in terms of performance impact with shading quality in particular, again, let me know in my Discord or in my streams. Next up is post-processing quality, and basically what you're going to want to be concerned with this is God rays. At nighttime, when it's clear and there's less clouds and stuff like that, post-processing at either high or epic has the best God rays, or I should say has God rays. When you go to medium or even low, you're going to lose those God rays coming from big light sources like the moon or even the sun. Also, going too low gets rid of the little vignette that's on the edges of your screen. I know this does bother some people, and in my 0.1 guide, I recommend having it at low. However, with the knowledge that I have now about the God rays and stuff like that that come from post-processing, I would recommend that if you want those God rays, you should go to high. Otherwise, if you don't mind not having those God rays and want a little bit more performance on average, you can go down to low and experience it that way. For me though, I will be sticking to high. Now finally, we've gone through all of that, and now we're at the different upscaling solutions that you can choose. Now, there are 4 of them. You have, I'll go through it. It's going to stutter every time though. Here we go. Ooh, we got TSR right here, which is Unreal Engine's built-in upscaling solution. You have DLSS, which is Nvidia's upscaling solution. This can only run on RTX cards, so 20, 30, 40, and 50 series. Then you have FSR, or Fidelity Super Resolution. This is AMD's solution that can run on a variety of hardware, and I believe the version for FSR is 3.0, though I can be corrected in the comments. And then finally, we have Intel's XeSS. This is Intel's upscaling solution, which also runs on a variety of different hardware. However, it's made specifically in mind with Intel's GPUs. Just in case you did not know, These upscalers take a lower resolution image and then upscale it using their own algorithms to get it as close to native as they can, which results in higher performance. The different settings you choose, for example, quality with DLSS or balance with FSR or performance with XeSS, determine the base resolution that it attempts to upscale from. TSR, however, has a slider that you basically drag around to set the base resolution, so you can set it to any percentage you want. Now, personally, for me, I do like DLSS the most out of the options, as I have access to it on my GPU. Madfinger Games also said that they have updated DLSS to DLSS 4, giving the highest image quality possible. But there's a big but there, and that but is that for DLSS, it is not actually using the newer model that you may have heard about called the Transformer model. If you play Tarkov, there was a huge thing about having the Transformer model added to Tarkov, and I posted a couple of videos about it as well, and that does require you to use the preset K or J, I guess, for the game that you're running, for DLSS, in order for it to be using that newer model. Gray Zone Warfare is not doing that though. Gray Zone Warfare is running presets E for quality, balanced, and performance upscaling, and presets F for DLAA and ultra performance. I'm assuming that they made the choice to go with preset E and F over preset K because the Transformer model can have a worse performance impact on older gen RTX cards, so specifically 20 and 30 series. 40 series has a very minor performance impact with Transformer, and 50 series is non-existent. So for those GPUs, I would recommend the Transformer model if we had the option. Currently, the only way to enable it is to go into your Nvidia app and change it that way, or if you don't have the Nvidia app, using a program called Nvidia Profile Inspector. In the future, if Madfinger Games is watching this, I would really like to have a option to change your model, whether it be CNN or Transformer, or just allowing us to change the preset to then change the model, you know, something like that, as then those who could use that better upscaling solution without any performance impact could do that. But right now, the only way we can do that is by manually changing it ourselves outside of the game. For everyone else who doesn't have access to DLSS, you're going to have to use FSR. And of course, where you set this is going to be dependent on you, whether you're using FSR or you're using DLSS. Whether you want to upscale or not is going to be dependent on how much FPS you want to get, especially, you know, if you're GPU bottlenecked, which of course GPU bottleneck means your GPU is at 100% usage or very close to it. That means your GPU bottlenecked, and you'll see a performance increase once you enable upscaling. Now, whether you want to actually use upscaling or not is going to depend on a couple different things. Firstly, you want to make sure that your GPU bottlenecked, which, let's be honest, if you're playing Gray Zone, you probably are. If you have any sort of performance monitoring utility, even something like Nvidia's FrameView, which they have in their overlay, or MSI Afterburner, CapFrameX, Hardware Info, a bunch of those, you can see the GPU usage. If your GPU usage is at 100%, you're in a GPU bottleneck. Assuming that you are, then you will have to choose how low you want to go in quality with the upscaling in a trade-off for performance. For example, as you go from quality to balance to performance to ultra performance with, say, DLSS or FSR, you will get lower image quality because the resolution that it's starting off with is a lower base resolution. The quality of the upscale will also depend on your base resolution, since the higher base resolution you have, so aka, for example, your monitor's resolution is 4K, you can upscale with DLSS performance and still be upscaling from something like 1080p. However, if you're at 1080p and you use DLSS performance, you're upscaling from 540p, because when you use DLSS performance, you're running at half or 50% of what your monitor's resolution is, and then it attempts to upscale. Half of 4K, which is 2160p, is 1080p, and half of 1080p is 540p. On screen now, you'll see all the different scaling options for FSR, DLSS, and XeSS, and what their resolution percentage is. Keep in mind that TSR is, again, that slider, so you can just set it to wherever you want if you decide that that's the one that you like the most. And I would assume that most of you probably would like DLSS or FSR the most, but I figured I would provide the XeSS scaling numbers just in case you would like to try that one as well. Overall, I would use upscaling more as like a tool to get some higher refresh rates after you've tuned the rest of the settings. I wouldn't use upscaling, especially if you're considering using it aggressively, unless that's sort of like your last resort, so to speak. Not that it's necessarily bad, but you are reducing your resolution input, so things at a distance will tend to look worse the lower you set it at. So be very cautious of that and set your upscaling appropriately. I personally am using DLSS at DLAA, which is native resolution, because I'm fine with the performance I'm getting at that point. If you'd like to see a full video of me breaking down each one of the upscalers, doing some testing like for like in Gray Zone, I can do that too, but I didn't include it here because, I mean, you see the timestamp of the video. I mean, you already know it's way too long. So let's just get it to the next topic before this keeps going. There's also frame generation, which again is completely user preference. Just know that when you enable either DLSS frame generation or FSR frame generation, that you will get a latency impact. What this does is it basically uses a little bit of GPU resources to generate fake frames, quote unquote, to put in between each one of your real frames. Now, those fake frames don't accept user input, meaning that a frame is delayed until that fake frame is finished showing. It can't generate a frame without knowing what comes after that frame. Since we have DLSS 4 now, if you're on a 50 series card, you can enable multi-frame generation if you'd like. And for me, I sometimes do like running frame generation using DLSS's frame generation on 2x. Ignore the frame time graph here, that's going to be off. But generally, I would recommend using frame generation only if your base FPS is around 60 FPS or higher. When you're below that, it does make the FPS smoother, but it also feels over smooth and not responsive in the slightest. This to me at roughly 60 FPS base is playable, but again, it's going to be user preference on whether or not you like using frame generation or not. Regardless of if you use frame generation or not, I would highly recommend using Nvidia Reflex low latency, as that will decrease the amount of latency between your input and it showing up on the screen. It does this by eliminating the render queue and syncing up the work that the CPU and GPU are doing, so that whenever the CPU is done preparing the work for the GPU, it can then immediately shift the work over to the GPU and the GPU does it. It doesn't have to wait in line for the GPU to be done with its work. I haven't noticed any frame rate inconsistencies or issues with running Reflex yet in this game, but if I do see anything, I'll make sure to post it in the comments below. Finally, after all of that, we're at the last setting, and oh my god, the recording's already 44 minutes. This is gonna, oh man. Oh, I'm sorry to the future me editing this. I'm probably gonna be, I'm gonna be livid with myself. Anyway, the last option is variable rate shading. You can think of variable rate shading as sort of like an upscaler, but just for the shading portion of creating a frame. So shading meaning lighting. It basically takes a scene, picks a point on that scene, and then says, okay, for that, we're going to assume the lighting for a given region of pixels based on a center. Usually it's for every pixel on the screen. It takes that one pixel, calculates the pixel shader, and then, you know, passes that information along. But for variable rate shading, it can take a point in between, say, 4 pixels in a square, and that point at the center of those 4 pixels is where we'll then assume the color of the other pixels, you know, around that point, those 4 pixels. I collected a couple different screenshots comparisons so you guys can see sort of the issue when you use variable rate shading though. This first set of screenshots is from the main menu, and the first thing you're going to notice is that I don't have them in order. Okay, yeah. The second thing you're going to notice is that variable rate shading definitely impacts your anti-aliasing quality. For instance, if you look at this, what even is antenna thing in the background, you can see that variable rate shading has a massive issue with keeping these lines black here. It sort of just loses it in comparison to just having variable rate shading off. Alternatively, I did see some anti-aliasing issues on the edge of the gun here. You can see it's a bit more sharp and like ghosting here on some of the edges of some of these objects. And this is generally an issue with variable rate shading, is it can make some textures appear a little bit more blurry and can make the image appear a little bit less stable. And for variable rate shading, I really want you to take a look at some of these power lines right here. As I said on variable rate shading, you will very quickly see that these power lines just, all of their anti-aliasing just kind of goes out the window there. By default, I believe they have quality, which you can sort of pass, but at the same time, it doesn't give you enough performance for me to make it really worthwhile to have on. Unless you're really scraping for every single bit of performance you possibly can, it's not worth it. In my testing though, it was only a couple percentage points, and really this is not worth your time. I would personally run this off in all cases unless you really need every single bit of performance. And that's everything. Finally, every single setting. Now, after a lot of turmoil, it is, what time is it? It's 3:15 and I need to get to editing this video as soon as possible. But there's one more thing that I'm sure I'm going to love that I'm adding at the end of this because it's going to require more editing, but it's some quick settings recommendations. If you're aiming for the best mix between graphics and performance, my suggestions would probably sit like global illumination at high, shadow quality at high, text resolution is fine at epic or high, effects quality would be high, reflections quality, honestly for aiming for performance, would probably be at medium. And again, this is a mix of performance and visuals, so that's why I wouldn't go to epic here unless you really want those nice reflections, which I do, so I'm going to keep the epic. But foliage quality I have at high, shading quality, as I mentioned before, I have not seen, so I keep that at epic. Post-processing I have at high, and then of course these are going to be your personal preference from here on out with all of these, whether you want upscaling or frame generation and all that. If you're trying to squeeze out as much performance as possible on a lower end machine, my recommendations would probably sit at global illumination on low, shadow quality on low. For object quality, I haven't seen much of a difference, but of course, you know, if I see something different, I'll let you know, but for now I'm going to leave that at epic. Text resolution I would set to be on medium. Effects quality I would also probably set to low here. Reflections quality would be medium. Foliage quality would be medium. And shading quality, of course, I didn't see anything. Post-processing quality for max performance I would set to low. And then, of course, excluding all these other options down here, we are sitting without frame generation in the 150s, at least inside of here. This would obviously be for the lower end machine. And even though this looks nowhere near as good as the higher options, this will get more people in the door, and I'm really happy that they're working to get more people in the door who may not have the highest end hardware. Also, I should note for variable rate shading, I don't want to forget about that. If you really need every bit of performance, then of course this can be set to performance as well to net just every little bit. But again, there's not much there and it's going to look a lot worse setting to performance. So a good mix would probably be quality. But yeah, that's the suggestions for high and low end PCs. And I got to get out of here because I have to edit this video and it's already past 3:15. So I got to get moving. I want to try to not stay up till midnight while editing this video. I'm sure editor me can tell you how that's going. And yeah, thank you for watching to the end. As I said before, I have drops running on my channel, on my Twitch channel, so make sure you go check that out. If you need more help as well, I highly recommend either posting a comment or posting in my Discord. I have a wonderful community in there who can help you out, over 3,000 members strong. And yeah, thank you for watching the end of the video. There will be updates if needed in the comments and in the description. And yeah, I will see you in my streams. I'm going to get to editing. And for now, this will be Clem, clocking out. Later.